Hello and welcome back. All right, so in this section, we're gonna go over what layers are, how to use them, and much more. Now, in this first lesson, I wanna share with you the basics of layers and what they are and how they work. But first, let's define what a layer is, because you may be wondering, what is a layer? Well, let me give you the official definition of a layer. So a layer, as a noun, is a sheet, quantity, or thickness of material, typically one of several, covering a surface or body. All right, so in the real world, I have a photographic image here. I have some images behind me as well. And you can consider these sheets of paper and the canvas gallery wraps that I have as a layer. So I have layer one, my image here, and let's say I want to add something to the image. I could draw on this image, and let's say I want to add a lizard for whatever reason, and then I decide, you know what, after drawing it, I don't like that lizard, I want a dog instead. Well, I can't go back and undo it because there's no delete key for, or backspace key for this piece of paper, or this layer. So what I can do instead is I can draw out a lizard on another piece of paper. So this is a layer as well. So layer one, layer two, and then I can stack the two based on my creative vision. Now, in the real world, again, we can print on different types of paper or canvas. So in this case, I have an image here of a couple that I shot, and I printed them on a canvas gallery wrap. So this is another type of layer. We can have all kinds of different layers in the real world as well as the digital world, which you're going to learn about in the next lesson. We're going to take a look at some of the different types of layers that we can use. Now, in addition to that, let's say you have a piece of glass. So the glass, you can see through it depending on if there's any film or anything on it. So there's some opacity to that layer. So you can technically adjust the layer in the real world as well as the digital world. So we're also going to take a look at how you can customize your layers in the digital world. So let's say in the real world, we have a piece of glass and we have three of them stacked together, and each one of them has some paint on them of different colors and different intensities of those colors. So when you put those three pieces of glass together, or the three layers, you can then see through different parts of the layers and you can create your artwork that way. All right, so those are a couple of different ways we can use layers in the real world. Now, one more quick demonstration about layers, and then we'll dive into Photoshop. Now, when I started off as a graphic designer back in the late 1980s, yes, I'm that old, we didn't have Photoshop because Photoshop didn't come out until 1990. So what I had to do was I had to draw out my design concepts on paper. If I made a mistake, I would have to start all over before I submitted it to my client. So in this case, I misspelled the product and I had to redo this from scratch. As I began to do it more and more, I got a little bit smarter, and I realized that I could put different elements on different layers. So here I have some shading for my text in this area. And then I realized I could put my title on a different piece of paper and my other content on another piece of paper as well. And then I could stack all of those as individual layers. And then if I made a mistake on one, or maybe the client changed their mind on the title, I can simply remove that layer and add in a new layer. All right, so those are some ways to think about layers in the real world, but we can also apply these concepts in GIMP. Anything that you want to do on separate layers if possible. So content, elements, designs, other images, if you're doing a photo collage, you want to put all of those on individual layers. All right, now let's take a look at the layers included in this particular document by going to the Layers panel and viewing the layers from there, which is located down here in the bottom right. That is if you have the same workspace selected as I do, which we covered in the last section. If you didn't watch that video tutorial, real quick, you can go up to Window, Workspace, and select Essentials from here. And if for some reason you're still not seeing that layer panel, come down here and select Layers. So inside of our Layers panel here, as you can see, we have 3 different layers. We have a background layer, a layer 2, and a layer 3. So our background layer is also locked, which is represented by this lock icon right here, and I'll explain more about that in just a second. And the background layer is, well, it's the background for the rest of the layers. So we have 2 layers here above it, and this becomes the background. So by default, whenever you open a new image or when you create a new document, it's going to automatically be called background for that first particular layer, and it's going to be locked. Now, the other thing you may notice about the layers is they each have a thumbnail, and it represents the content of that layer, and it can also tell you the type of layer that it is. So right now we have 3 different types of layers out of 12 possible layers. Now, we're not going to go over all 12 layers at this time because I don't want to overwhelm you with too much information. We're going to go over more of those different 12 types of layers in upcoming lessons throughout this class. So for now, we're going to go ahead and explore these layers first. Now, you may be saying to yourself, well, I don't really see any of the content from layer 2 and layer 3 right now. And that's because those other 2 layers, layer 2 and layer 3, are turned off. So if you take a look at the background layer again, to the left of the thumbnail is an icon that looks like an eye. So if we click on it, go ahead, click on it, and that's actually going to turn that particular layer off. And now we have a transparent background because there's no content to show from any of the layers right now. So if we want to turn it back on, all we have to do is click in this area again, in this little empty box right here. It's kind of hard to see, so just go ahead and click right here, and then that will turn that particular layer back on. Okay, so that's how you show and hide the contents of layers. So our next layer, layer 2, is a text layer, and I know this based on the icon in the thumbnail area right here. So anytime you see this letter T, you'll know that layer is a text layer, or it contains text. So let's go ahead and click right here to turn it on, and presto, there's our text. Pretty awesome. All right, now let's go ahead and change our design layout by moving the text into a new position. So the first thing we need to do before we can actually move it is we need to make sure we have the correct tool selected for moving that text. So what we need is the Move tool, which is located right up here in the top part of your toolbar. So if you just click on this icon, you will select your Move tool. All right, let's go over to the text. We're going to click and drag that text with our mouse button still held down and release. Uh-oh, looks like it didn't work. And we get this little message from Photoshop. Let's see, what does it say? It says, cannot move layer because it's locked. All right, so can you guess why we can't move layer 2 even though we know it's not locked? Well, here's why we can't move layer 2. And that's because we do not have layer 2 selected. Right now, we have the background layer selected. So to select layer 2, just click on it. Now, did you see what happened when you clicked on it? If you take a look at layer 2 a little closer, you can see there's a light gray color highlighting that layer. Plus, the thumbnail has a bright white outline around it. Now, if we go ahead and click on the background layer, again, go ahead and do that, you're going to notice the highlight has then been moved to that particular layer, and the outline is now around the thumbnail. So we want to make sure we have the layer that we want to move selected before we can actually move it. Okay, so let's go ahead and reselect layer 2. Let's click on the text and drag it to a new location and then release your mouse button. Awesome. All right, so we moved the text. All right, so next up, let's turn on layer 3 and the text and image have been replaced with a solid blue color. Now, why do you think that is? I know it's pretty obvious, and that's because layer 3 is above the other 2 layers, and because that layer contains a shape the same size as the document, it's going to hide everything below it. Now, if we take our move tool, like we did with our text, we can click on the content of that layer and move it, and then the layers below it become visible. Let's go ahead and undo that. If you actually moved that particular layer, we're going to go up to Edit and select Undo. Now, the other thing we can do is we can rearrange the layers themselves. So maybe I want this shape to continue filling up the entire document, but I want to be able to see the text layer. So to do that, we can click on this layer, hold down your mouse button, drag down below layer 2 until you see that little blue line. Once you release, your layer is then below that layer and it makes the content above it visible. Now let's say you want to move layer 3 below the background layer. So let's try that. We're going to grab that layer, click on it, hold down your mouse button, and drag it below the background layer. The only problem is it's not allowing you to do that because our background layer is currently locked and it is, or it should be, the background for the entire document. So you can't rearrange the background layer. Now, if you decide you need to move this particular layer or rearrange it, you will need to unlock the layer. To do that, just double click on the layer and then you can rename the layer, click OK, and then it becomes unlocked, and then you can rearrange it or even move the content within that layer as needed.